go right ahead.
Where do we want to go? Anybody want to narrate our thought process? I can start. Homepage, total sales would just be like big old number of how much they've sold. Then the real stuff happens in here. So we are open to any changes that make your life easier. Boots has already given us like some feedback on style things that we can change to save y'all time. But our thought is to kind of have a series of drop downs. We understand these take a while to build out, and especially to attach the data to. So main focus was going to be on kind of the groups or the communities and really building that out and showing that. The rest is kind of there just to show what it can be. So they would go through and pick their community. They could stop there. They could go into individual, product type, time frame, payment type, apply settings, and then the graph would update just with the sales data for what they've chosen. It's a very narrowed down version of our thought process. So questions, thoughts, please chime in.
So one thing that I was listening to y'all talk about in the other room was as you were dropping these down, so like say that I go to groups and within global, I'm clicking the community that the say Port-au-Prince that you have listed there. You want these individuals to appear only within the span of their community, so you don't have just a big drop down list of individuals. What you really want is a like if I click on a particular community, that's when the individuals of that community appear.
Yes. Yeah. So like it would be, in the circle, it would have like this guy sold 3 and you hover over and it says the name. I think that would make the most sense. And then if they have like individual files, you could click on person, but if not, then yeah, the individual is not super necessary. Or not like the drop down for individual. We still need to show the people because that's what they said.
Okay. But isn't our isn't our focus like not particularly say individual, but like the whole, I guess, section or region as a whole, like for the executive entrepreneur side? So I think that's what the section we're working on, right? The executives. So
yeah, they have 2 primary users, so it's kind of like their C-suite, and they're going to be more interested in like the global or community, but then there's also the people on the ground in the communities, and they're going to be looking at individual level as well. So there's kind of 2 users. What we really should do, team, is come up with our problem statement, because that can help us determine where we're going to spend our time and focus our attention.
It would be a summary of kind of what you're thinking right now in terms of problem statement.
Yeah, so like completely off the top of my head, it would be like, Joshua needs a way to quickly and easily find sales data for Port-au-Prince or for a specific community. And so then we design to solve that problem for him. That's very specific and based entirely on this drop down. So we want to be a little broader than that and not include features. But why are we designing this? Because they need information about sales. Why? Some people need it to help coach individual contributors. The C-suite needs it to gauge performance.
I think in our meeting with Julia, she was talking about presenting it to board members or, whatever it might be. And then we would, with the other user in mind, we're trying to solve the problem of people on the ground, of the community directors, the people who are working in Haiti. How can they access or track these statistics offline, I guess, maybe. Again, this is off the top of our head. We just wanted to make sure that we were giving you guys a wireframe sooner rather than later. So that's why we're doing things a little out of order.
No, I mean, I think this is good. Don't feel like this is, this is bad. I mean, gives I think all of us a feel for, number one, what the page is going to look like, because I don't think any of us had a visualization of that. And then also, how's the data represented? Okay, it's a graph. We're doing that as a pie chart represented by the circle there. And then what are we representing? We're representing multiple levels, from the global level all the way down to community and individual, and then wanting the ability to select the sales and apply the settings to the graph based upon the filterable settings of, hey, this is my community, hey, this is my individual, hey, this is my global. This is a great first start. I think that we can definitely run with this. This will give us a lot more perspective on what type of data we need where. So, I think y'all are kind of like, oh, I didn't have time to do this. Well, that's fine. This is great. None of us have enough time. That's just how it is. So I think this is a great way to get started, and it'll give us a lot of perspective in our building tonight of kind of how we construct the data structure we need for the front end that we're going to start building tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah, I kind of second that. Yes, this kind of gives a good, view of how thinking about having it look like. My only thing I was just bringing up was that I guess I don't know if we should go as far as the individual level. I think I think the other was group or team 3. I think they're the ones who they're more focused on the people that are on the ground, where they want more kind of more individual, whereas the executive high level.
The individuals for the other team, like the Android team, is they want the ability to input these things and then kind of amalgamate them and send them in a sync, right? And that sync being some data type. Versus there are what they were talking about is 2 users in this. There are the people in Haiti that are kind of like the sales distributor managers, quote unquote, that are dealing with the entrepreneurs and helping troubleshoot to make sure that their sales and commissions are actually registering on the application. But there's also the C-suite users that are looking at this from a perspective, like a more global level perspective. So you're solving 2 user kind of categories with this. The higher category of user being that C-suite level to be able to track performance over a period of time, and the lower level user being the equivalent of, forget his name, but the guy who was on the second call, kind of the distributor manager kind of person. Yeah.
Right, okay.
Would y'all agree with that, UI people, UX people?
Yeah, I do. So I think of that second user as like the manager, right? So they can go to the individual and be like, oh, Talon has only sold 1 thing and Rachel's selling 76. So we've got to do some coaching, we've got to do some training. But I wonder, do we need a list of the individuals? I think Talon, you were kind of alluding to this before, that maybe, and I don't know if this is easier, so this is a question for y'all, but maybe they click their community and then they just click individual. And instead of having a list of Rachel, Talon, Megan, Boots, it's on the graph and you can hover over and see it, but you don't have to have each person's name in a drop down. Does that make sense?
That is similar. We were looking at Salesforce as one of their competitors because that's what they're currently using now, and they'd like to move away from. And that hover feature is something that they have. And also, we want to keep the whole time that we're part of the problem statements, no matter who the user is that the entire application needs to be more visual.
Mhm.
And less text heavy. And right now, Salesforce is very text heavy. So that would be the benefit of doing a hover rather than a list.
I like the idea of a hover. I'm just wondering if there is maybe a different way to do it, because when I look at the number of people for sales or loans in the CSV files, there are hundreds of people they have on the CSV files. So I'm not sure if we can have hundreds of people on a pie chart and then hover over because it's going to be super, super tiny, whatever section each person has. So maybe if we can find a better way to visualize or group data and visualize it, or maybe the hovering will work and I'm wrong, which is completely okay as well.
Well, the other thing is the people using the individual are going to be the ones according to what we think, it's the people in Haiti. So they're not going to have great internet as well. So I think maybe just you can do the circles till you get to the community. Once you click on the community, it could be just a list of the people, but done in a pretty way, or that sort of thing. Because if it's going to be per community, there's 50 people, then yeah, we can't do a pie chart, but we could do a chart that says how many sales, information that's needed, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I think that makes the most sense because yeah.
And I got one more question. I'm sorry if I'm
Bring them on.
just understanding. So I guess what we're doing now, what separates, I guess, our portion from team 3?
My understanding is team 3 is doing it for the entrepreneur, the person who is selling the stuff, to go in and log their sales.
So the demo of, sorry to interrupt, Megan, the demo that Julia did earlier, I don't know if you were in that or if video.
Yeah, I missed that. I was in a.
Okay, so that it's basically just a very terrible app that is far too many screens and data, and it's just kind of mystery meat, which is a UX thing for we don't know what any of this info means. So that is what the entrepreneurs are currently using. From an executive point of view or a stakeholder point of view, that's not their main product. They're spending the majority of their time on Salesforce, which we asked, and they eventually do want to move away from. So we're doing something different than all of the other teams because we're making an alternative to Salesforce, not an alternative to Taro.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, where I'm at right now, I think this is a good start, and it's a good place for the engineers to start creating the backend, the routes, and whatever we need to display this page. But I'm open to any other thoughts to see if there's anything else we need to work on before we begin.
I have a question just about process. So once we break from this, we obviously wanted the UX team wants to take advantage of the time we have tonight. If we continue to sort of bring this into high fidelity, so that means colors, pretty buttons and shadowing and all that stuff, will that have, I know Boots was don't share the Figma file, but will that have an effect on your work? If we add a shadow to this button, that changes an entire.
So I think the answer to that question is probably going to be more along the lines of, we obviously want to have you while we're building. So I think
Okay.
whoever is handling front end construction is going to want you in the room with them as they're constructing it. So that's going to require some patience from your perspective, because that's going to take more time than you're able to say it, right? But you know, as much as you can be available to essentially what we call pair program with somebody, you be the eyes and ears, this is what I want, and then the programmer is trying to complete what you want, essentially. I think that would be the best way to process this. So if y'all want to all be in a room together, then that's fine. If y'all want to be kind of in rooms working on different features of the same page, that's fine. But you know, I think separation of concerns, if we put one of y'all or two of y'all with one engineer, and then y'all are working on front end to be able to accomplish kind of the visual aspect of whatever data is coming in, I think that's the best way to go about doing this, rather than sharing the Figma file, spending all this time on shadows and that sort of thing, and then we're trying to recreate something as you're adjusting it. I think just like starting with where you're at now, and then, okay, let's, you know, as we need to get together and answer those questions and kind of get together on how these features construct together, that's great. The rest of today, spend time doing what you were talking about, but when it starts tomorrow, I say we just get y'all in rooms with engineers and say, and have y'all be kind of like the angel on the shoulder kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah, because this is not even close to what this is visually going to look like. I think the functionality of that search and the drop downs and all of that, we know we're going to have in here.
That really is all we need to get started though, Megan,
Good.
is the functionality and kind of the placement layout that you have listed there. And then we can make, you know, visual refinements as is desired.
Okay. So yeah, tonight we're going to want to do some testing to make sure our assumptions make sense to other people and try to make it pretty. I don't know that that's going to be done first thing tomorrow. So whoever is working on like the front end stuff might have to wait on us a little bit, but I'm planning on working pretty late tonight. So we'll try to get as early as possible, kind of the finished pretty stuff.
Yeah, I think
And
from a
then,
timeline, yeah, I think from a timeline perspective, we will probably spend majority of our time, whoever's on this evening, working on back end stuff anyway. So that will give y'all time to do what you like in terms of design.
Okay.
Cool.
So for whoever's working on the front end stuff, like ideally, when would you like to start working on it tomorrow?
Well, that's another question we have to resolve this evening, is kind of who is handling what, I think.
Perfect.
So give us, I will definitely post that in Slack, but give us just until 7 Central, so 8 Eastern, for us to figure that out.
Okay.
And for now, do you want us to just export these screens so you can see them? Do you have, or is that not?
Yeah, I mean, if you just want to like, maybe not even export, if you want to just take a screenshot of them and put them in the Trello board.
Yep.
Okay.
Is that what you meant by exporting?
That's what I meant. Yeah, it's
Okay,
just
sorry.
like a PDF of what this looks like. Yeah, it's a screenshot.
Great.
Essentially. Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. Should we go back into a breakout?
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks, y'all.
What do we think?
Yeah, I mean, from what we're seeing, it was definitely doable. Front end part looks pretty straightforward, I would say, at least on that part. Maybe, you know, getting the drop downs now, that'll take some time, but.
Well, I guess I'm sitting here from my perspective, are we doing one big call from the back end to supply all the data for this one page? Because that is a big call. Or are we doing incremental calls as they hit the drop downs?
I guess it depends on how this data is structured when we get like final structure of how we, can call the data. Like I would think of it more as it's all in the different sections, and then we push that and call, and we'll get, I guess, all in one call, kind of. But if it's separate calls, I don't know. It seems separate calls are hard to implement, I think, versus one.
Well, especially given the bandwidth constraints that we're talking about, even one large call is a difficult thing to handle. So I think we're really going to have to do a lot of back-end scrubbing to essentially bare bones the data for it to be represented in the front end. Like the very existence of the data does not mean that we have to send it. We just need to send what is absolutely essential to the React front end, because the React front end is already going to be heavy enough as it is based on what their kind of internet connection they are talking about relative, right? Like we're talking probably 10 megabyte download speeds. So React is already pushing that limit, I think, for at least from what I've been reading, from a performance perspective, not to mention the connection issues. So,
Right, but sorry to cut you off. I'm sorry.
good. No, go ahead.
But my thought was like, if the C-suite is using this and people in upper management, then I'm not sure if internet connection would be a problem, because they're mostly.
Well, you were on the call with the guy that was calling in from WhatsApp, right?
Yeah, I was mostly on the call when I forget her name.
Julia.
Yeah, when she was on the phone. Yeah, when she was on the call.
Yeah, so I think his name was Fenton or something like that. He is one of the other users that we're talking about. And so as he was talking, there was a lot of like, I'm sorry, I didn't hit a question. I'm sorry, like, and that's an internet call. And I'll grant you that VoIP connections use a fair amount of bandwidth. But I guess what I'm saying is I think there is a pretty hard barrier of performance that we have to consider. So I don't know that doing one large call, it really, like you said, it's going to depend on what quantity of data we're trying to load in the one call, and if it's possible to load it that quickly.
Yeah. So now, if you don't mind me asking, which is like, I'm probably backtracking a little bit, but just to try and understand what we're working with, have we figured out how we're going to be getting the data to interact with our program? Like how we're going to be are we doing a fetch request? Are we going to JSONify the data and then do a fetch request? Are we, do we have that planned out, or do we think about that?
So I think the conversation that Friedel and I were having earlier when other people were off was we're going to have to stringify it as a service call from the React. So any data is going to be stringified in a JSON format so that it can be turned into an object in either place. And that's how you connect the React front end to the API backend. And that structure, I think, we're still trying to figure out what is the essential pieces of data. Although I think that presentation that we just had is extremely relevant and valuable, given the fact that essentially what we're trying to parse out is name of the individual, region that they're located in, and the sale quantity of what they just sold in terms of an item. Because we're not interested in the total number of items sold, we're interested in the sales volume. So it seems to me that those three pieces of information are most valuable. We're not even for this app, doesn't sound like we're even concerned with date, because all we're doing is a global to community level to individual.
Right. I mean, I guess I haven't looked at the date section on the CSV files, but my initial thinking was that the date would be important to see sales over time versus loans over time. Like I assumed that time would be important. Of course, it might not be. I don't know, but that was my initial thought.
I 100% think that date and time in terms of all of those spectrums is extremely important. Don't get me wrong from their use case perspective, but our ability to complete a feature in this application, I think, needs to be narrowed even further. So I think from a scope perspective, we're going to have our hands full building an API and then building a front end to represent just the total sales of the community the global and the individual. And I think that is a narrow enough scope that it's achievable, but broad enough to be usable.
Okay, that makes sense. And so I'm assuming we're using Python Flask backend and a React front end. Is that what we're doing?
That sounds like the direction that we're going from a perspective of, we have a data scientist who can help us structure the data that knows how to use Python library pandas.
Mhm.
And we have experience between you and I and Riddell as well, who have used Python before and Flask fairly recently, to the point that we could probably reduplicate it, if nothing else than with a template pulled out using it. And so I think that from my perspective, that would be the easiest way to go, using everybody's abilities.
Right. I think that also makes sense. I just have another question. I don't know if you spoke about this with Rob, but so if we go down the route of a Python Flask backend and React frontend, will he be able to, I guess, import the pandas library and create the visualizations we need within our code? Or like the way, like, I don't know how it works with data science, but like, will he be able to do that, create the visualizations inside our code?
That's the big question mark for me too. Is like, are we sending an image or are we sending the actual data itself? I would think that if we're populating individuals within those drop-down categories, that we're sending the data anyway, so we might as well send the data and do the visualizations on the front end. But that being said, I'm not sure that I know I'm happy to hear of anybody else who knows the NPM package that could be used for those type of visualizations. Otherwise, we might have to send the data separately to an API and then get it from that API visualized. So that's a question mark.
Yeah, the visualization part. I mean, we'll probably have to look up some type of package that'll do that. Like,
well, and I think that within our cohort, there were people who used those for their applications for visuals. So I feel like there's probably some example within our cohort's GitHubs of how to achieve that, just adapting that to our file. And I'm not sure which package that they used. And I seem to remember that presentation, they were very frustrated about how difficult it was to use that particular package. So we'll just take all of those into account as we're making decisions later today. But I didn't mean to interrupt you, Riddell. Go ahead and continue asking from the visualizations perspective.
Oh, no, I'm not asking. It's more like kind of like, I say, I know that there's some relation is possible. Like if we're using, for example, like semantic UI or something, for example, they have like, I mean, they can do like a line graph, not line graph, but like a
bar, progress bar kind of thing.
A bar, progress bar kind of thing or something like that, that technically is a visualization. So
okay,
maybe they have an extra somehow that's more along the pie type, or I don't know. We'll sort of have to research, but
okay. Yeah, so I would say so I'm going to take off here because I promised my wife would be off at 4. I will be back at 8 p.m. Eastern. But I would just say y'all get to work if you're going to stay on or take a break or whatever. And during the break, I'm going to be just looking at packages, I think, for this visualization thing, because I think that's the big question mark as to whether or not, and then I'll message Rob independently and hopefully get an answer specifically whether or not he can render an image with the data and then just send that to the front end or the other way around.
All right. Yeah, and I'll be also leave as well. I'll be back like around 9.
Okay.
Because, yeah, there's some stuff going on. But
okay.
In the
Sounds
meantime, yeah, I'll also front end part, I'll kind of look at that and try to, because I'm more comfortable with the front end versus back at this current stage. So
okay, sounds good. And then Hazik, are you staying on or are you going to take a break for a little while?
If I take a break, it'll be like 20 minutes or so. It won't be long. I'm going to stay on and we're using Python Flask, right? So I'm going to try and start building out the routes. No promises for anything though. I might get stuck. I don't know. Do you remember a template off the top of your head that we used in class in the cohort that would be useful?
There's a Flask auth template that you can just strip the auth out of and
Okay.
just use that. I think it's in, it's definitely in the Notion. So if you just go look for in the Flask section.
Okay, so I'm just gonna look at the Trello and the routes that they have. I'm just gonna try building them out. That sound good?
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay, cool. And we'll meet back at 8.
I will be back at 8 Eastern. Yes.
Cool. All right.